Today we are reviewing a submitted text regarding the recent archaeological discovery of a 3,500-year-old settlement in Egypt's Wadi Tumilat, which explores its physical artifacts and its ties to the Hyksos period and the biblical narrative of Jacob and Joseph.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one.
It really is. The material is remarkably strong. I mean, it has excellent geographical detail and just a super compelling premise. But we want to jump straight into the critique to help sharpen it. So passing it over to you to dive into the first point.
Right, let's get into it. Enhancing the description of the blended Egyptian Canaanite artifacts will significantly deepen the reader's understanding of this community's unique daily identity.
Yeah, because the narrative through line here starts at that really intimate micro level, right?
Exactly, the daily lives of the common people. The author actually points out that this is the true value of the discovery, rather than, just focusing on pharaohs and pyramids.
Right, it's about the earth-level reality. But looking at the text right now, it states that the community learned to integrate Egyptian and Canaanite cultures, and it mentions graves containing pottery and tools.
Yeah, which is great that they mention it, but that's a bit of a weakness right there. It relies entirely on telling rather than showing.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like, by stating this integration merely as a historical fact, the material completely misses the opportunity to ground this really fascinating cultural fusion in the specific physical evidence it just brought up.
Right. They just sort of say it happened.
Exactly. And as a reader, you're left disconnected. So my suggestion here is to expand on the physical characteristics of the findings inside those mud brick graves. Really vividly demonstrate exactly how these two distinct cultures merged in a practical physical sense.
Right, so we can actually visualize the blending.
Yes, exactly. For example, the author could explicitly link the mud brick grave structure, which, is a classic Egyptian architectural choice, with the specific pottery and work tools found inside.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They could describe how the tools might reflect Canaanite origins with specific shapes or craftsmanship while physically sitting inside this Egyptian-style burial.
That creates such a strong visual.
It really does. These are just a few ways to physically illustrate the cultural bridge instead of just giving us a textbook statement that it exists.
Yeah, it's like finding a 19th century American pioneer cabin, but realizing the inhabitants were eating off fine French porcelain,
Yes, that is a perfect analogy.
The contrast is where the story actually lived. But let me ask you this. The author keeps calling it a huge settlement. If we zoom in on these small tools, like a single axe or a clay pot, do we risk losing the big picture of that huge scale?
I mean, that's a fair concern, but I would argue that macro history is built entirely on micro details.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, calling it huge is just a statistic, right? But if you show me one deeply human, physically blended grave, and then tell me there are thousands of them, suddenly that massive scale feels real. It anchors the macro in something we can actually touch.
Right, it makes the scale matter, which actually leads perfectly into the next layer of the text. Because moving causally from those micro details of the daily tools, we naturally scale up to the massive infrastructure of the settlement itself.
Yeah, exactly. If the tools show who they were, the architecture has to show what they were doing.
Right, so what's our target here?
Tying the massive scale of the residential and storage structures directly to the community's role as a cultural and trade bridge will create a more cohesive and impactful narrative flow.
Because right now, let's see, the text describes these enormous residential complexes, the thick mud brick walls, the massive cooking halls, all in one paragraph.
Right.
But then it introduces the community's booming trade and agricultural success completely separately, like much later in the text.
Yeah. And that structural separation is a real weakness. It dilutes the impact of the archaeological findings. You have this sheer physical scale, but it feels entirely disconnected from the economic reality of the settlement.
Like the reader doesn't know why the walls are thick when they first read about them.
Exactly. You read massive cooking halls and you just think, okay, big rooms. You don't connect it to an industrial trade hub until pages later, and by then, the impact is lost.
So how do we fix that flow?
The suggestion is to reorganize the text so that the architectural evidence, specifically those large halls and storage facilities, is immediately utilized as the supporting proof for their expansive agricultural and trade operations.
Oh, so put cause and effect right next to each other.
Exactly. Like for a concrete example, the writer could weave these together by stating, the meticulously planned massive storage facilities physically manifest the community's thriving agricultural trade.
Oh, I like that phrasing.
Or they could say the sheer size of the cooking and baking halls directly supports the idea that this was a bustling economic hub connecting Canaan and Egypt.
Right.
And obviously, these are just a few possible ways to make the architecture serve the narrative, but they need to be linked.
Okay, I'm going to push back gently here.
Go for it.
The text already explicitly mentions they were a bridge between cultures and that they engaged in expansive trade. If I'm a reader, I can put two and two together. Is it strictly necessary to forcefully tie the mud brick walls to the trade if the reader can just infer it?
I mean, sure, readers definitely can infer it. They're smart, but explicitly connecting cause, which is the trade, and the effect, which is the massive storage, transforms what is basically a disjointed list of facts into a compelling, tightly woven argument.
Oh, I see. It's the difference between making them work for it and just guiding them through a strong argument.
Exactly. You don't want your reader doing the heavy lifting of connecting your evidence. When you do it for them, the narrative momentum is just so much stronger.
That makes total sense. So, now that we have solidified the community's daily identity through the tools, and we've scaled up to their massive economic footprint with the architecture, we have to look at the ultimate, overarching claim this text builds toward.
Right, the big one.
Their identity as the biblical Israelites in the land of Goshen.
Will significantly strengthen the credibility of the biblical connections made in the text.
This is such a delicate area to critique.
It really is. The current weakness is that the material boldly claims that these findings, quote, prove a thriving community that, quote, reinforces the historical fact of the Jacob and Joseph era.
Right. It basically treats the geographical overlap of the Hyksos period and the Genesis narrative as definitively identical.
Exactly. And that creates a massive logical leap. It presents a chronological overlap in the Eastern Delta as absolute, irrefutable proof of specific biblical individuals. And the problem is, that might completely alienate a skeptical reader.
Right. Because if I'm reading this and I see the word proof, my defenses go up. I'm thinking, wait, a grain silo doesn't literally prove Joseph built.
Precisely. So the suggestion here is to reframe it. Frame the archaeological findings as compelling contextual evidence that aligns beautifully with the biblical narrative, rather than outright historical proof of the specific events involving Jacob and Joseph.
That feels a lot safer, intellectually speaking. How would the author actually word that, though?
Well, there are plenty of ways, but for example, the author could use phrasing like, the discovery of large-scale food preparation and storage facilities in the fertile Eastern Delta mirrors the Genesis account of Joseph managing resources.
Oh, mirror. That's a great word.
Right? Or they could try something like, the presence of Semitic Hyksos in this geographic corridor provides a plausible historical backdrop that parallels the biblical timeline.
Plausible historical backdrop. That sounds so much more rigorously academic.
Exactly. And again, these are just a few out of all possible ways to draw a really robust connection without overstating the archaeological certainty. You just want to calibrate the language so you aren't making claims the physical dirt can't fully support.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure, yeah.
If the author softens the language from proof to alignment or parallels, do we risk losing the excitement of the discovery? I mean, readers picking this up are probably specifically looking for that direct biblical connection to Joseph. Doesn't softening it kind of let the air out of the balloon?
It's a totally valid fear, but I actually think the opposite is true. Careful, nuanced language actually builds trust.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, think about it. If a reader trusts the author's objectivity, if they see the author is being really careful with the evidence, they will find those parallels far more profound and reliable than forced proof.
That's a great point. If someone forces a connection, I instantly doubt everything else they've said.
Exactly. When you say it mirrors, you invite the reader to marvel at the connection themselves, rather than lecturing them into submission. It's just a much more engaging way to write history.
Well said. This has been a really fantastic breakdown of a genuinely fascinating piece of writing. Let me just quickly recap the three main takeaways we've discussed for the author.
Sounds good.
First, grounding the cultural fusion in specific physical descriptions of the grave artifacts, showing us the dirt rather than just telling us they integrated.
Yep.
Second, structurally linking the massive storage architecture directly to the community's trade economy, so the cause and effect are right next to each other on.
Right.
And third, nuancing the language to present the findings as compelling historical parallels to the Genesis narrative, rather than demanding the reader accept it as definitive.
Exactly. Those three shifts will make a huge difference.
Absolutely. So we want to warmly invite the listener to implement these actionable suggestions and submit the revised work back to the critique for further exploration. We'd love to see where this goes next.